Council and Commission statements on the latest developments in the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo and the situation in the northern municipalities of Kosovo. And once again, I would like to give the floor back to Mr. Pascual Navarro Rios.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Ladies and gentlemen, the members of Parliament, Commissioner. Violent events took place in May, and the European Union has condemned those events. Since then, the EU has called for a de-escalation from both sides and for an opening of the Pristina-Belgrade dialogue facilitated by the EU. Allow me to express our full condemnation of the recent attack against police officers in Kosovo. All of the events must be elucidated fully and those responsible brought to justice. In line with the declarations that have been made by the High Representative on behalf of the EU, we fully reiterate that all sides de-escalate tensions, they return to EU-facilitated dialogue, and that they undertake a constructive approach to relations. Lowering tension will be of utmost importance. The EU's position remains firm, and we make a request for clear, positive measures, and that should be done by both sides. In the Council, we consider to be concerned about the lack of progress to reduce tensions in the north of Kosovo. Just 2 weeks ago, we stated that the EU was set to put forward measures for Kosovo if they were able to make progress on the requests that we have asked, that we have put, including the holding of peaceful elections in the north of Kosovo. It seems important to underscore the fact that both sides need to be able to meet these requests to continue to make their progress towards EU accession, and we will continue to follow developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to request Commissioner Lenarčič come to the podium.
Mr. President, honourable members, State Secretary, on 24 September, Kosovo police has been attacked by heavily armed individuals in the midst of a major weapons smuggling operation, leaving 1 policeman dead and 3 wounded. The armed perpetrators barricaded themselves in the monastery of Banjska. In the exchange of fire with the Kosovo police, 3 assailants were killed, some wounded, and the rest fled. Some of those were treated in the hospital in Novi Pazar in Serbia. The scale of operation is unprecedented. The quantity of confiscated weapons is massive, and this raises serious concerns. This is a strong alarm bell that the situation in the north of Kosovo is extremely serious. Immediately on that Sunday, High Representative Vice President Borrell called Prime Minister Kurti and President Vučić and issued a statement and a press release where he condemned in the strongest terms the terrorist attack. He also called for restoring calm and stability, for the assailants to surrender immediately, and for the 49 pilgrims at Banjska Monastery to be able to leave safely. The EU's rule of law mission in Kosovo, EULEX, arrived at the scene rapidly and in line with its mandate, monitored the police operation, and escorted the pilgrims safely out of Kosovo. The EU is closely following the ongoing investigations and expects that the perpetrators be brought to justice and Serbia to fully cooperate, including in preventing smuggling through the administrative boundary line. In parallel to the investigations, it is important that both Kosovo and Serbia refrain from any action that could further escalate the situation. In this context, the rhetoric from Belgrade in relation to 24 September is very concerning, as well as the manner in which the day of mourning was observed. What is already clear at this stage is that this operation indicates a serious military build-up and constitutes a major escalation which goes against the EU's repeated calls for de-escalation in the north of Kosovo. In its 3rd June statement, the EU called on both parties to take concrete measures to de-escalate. This was reiterated in the EU's 19 September statement. Swift de-escalation is more urgent than ever, and the perpetrators need to be brought to justice. The attack should not serve as an excuse to divert attention from the dialogue on the normalization. We are also concerned over the Serbian military build-up in the south of Serbia. Swiftly holding early local elections in the north of Kosovo remains crucial to help diffuse the tensions. The EU calls on all political actors at all levels of governance in both Kosovo and Serbia to engage constructively in the process leading to early local elections in the north of Kosovo, to avoid further escalatory steps and support progress in the EU-facilitated dialogue. We are at a crucial junction in the EU-facilitated dialogue. Earlier this year, Kosovo and Serbia reached an agreement on the path to normalization, which offers a clear platform for normalizing their relations. The obligations stemming from this agreement remain valid and binding. The negotiations phase ended in March. The focus now must be on implementation and on taking the process of normalization forward. At the last high-level dialogue on 14 September, neither party demonstrated a genuine commitment to advance the normalization process, despite continued intense efforts by the European Union. Therefore, both are in violation of their dialogue obligations. They must act with restraint and return to the implementation of their respective dialogue commitments and seriously commit to the normalization process. And let me remind the parties that their European paths go through the dialogue and normalization. Further escalation will have a very adverse impact on their European paths, as well as for the stability and security of the Western Balkans region. Thank you.
Ersten Redner das Wort erteilen.
So now I give the floor to Vladimir Bilčík on behalf of the European Parliament.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. In Banjska, people were killed, and the situation on the ground is escalating alarmingly. We had not seen this kind of violence on the ground over the past decade. We do need a proper investigation. We need a delivery of justice. And this is why also both sides have an enormous responsibility that we all get back to dialogue as soon as possible. If I look at the broader picture in the dialogue, let me say very clearly that with the arrival of Albin Kurti to power, the dialogue has been stalling, unfortunately, and not moving in the direction of finding a solution for practical issues, such as the association of Serbian municipalities or new credible elections in northern Kosovo. And I'm saying this as someone who is very openly and repeatedly critical of the Serbian side on many issues, including the most recent escalation. Yes, we need the uncovering of what really happened on the 24th of September, and the ball here is very much in the hands of Belgrade. We need facts, hard facts, full facts, not heightened emotional pronouncements by the media and political leaders. When it comes to proper and credible investigation, we need this for the sake of a meaningful future dialogue. We do not need a heightened race of who is to blame, nor a superficial game of earning immediate sympathies from abroad. Destabilizing Western Balkans only benefits Putin's Russia. And as enlargement is back on our agenda, we expect the same commitment from our partners in the region. So, dear colleagues, no compromises can be reached with violence, and no results can be achieved by force. The only solution to a peaceful dialogue is a commitment to return to the negotiating table. Thank you very much.
Mr. Piccola, you have the floor.
Commissioner, the latest events of 24th September are evidence of pertinent tension, always on the verge of escalation. So far, we have witnessed severe incidents with attack on KFOR forces, the abduction of Kosovo police officer, and the latest terrorist attack. With great concern, we monitor news on the location of the Serbian army along the border. Formally, on paper, things look better than they are in practice. There is a political appetite for enlargement. Ohrid agreement was reached, but in reality, there is no real movement forward. We have seen restrictive measures on Kosovo. At least the same or even more extensive one should be applied to Serbia after the latest events. For real success, our policy needs to be coherent. We cannot have such divergent policies towards Serbia and Kosovo among our member states. Finally, we can stop funding infrastructure projects if there is no improvement in fundamentals and dialogue provisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kuchuk.
Commissioner, dear colleagues, while EUREX and KFOR are on the ground working closely with authorities to manage the situation, we cannot turn a blind eye to the troublesome military movements by Serbia along the Kosovo border. Stability in the region is hanging by a thread, and the rhetoric and actions emerging from Serbia's leadership, particularly in the context of broader European security situation, are indeed cause for concern. It is unbelievable that we have to hear through our staunch allies, the Americans, about the military build-up by the Serbians. We must question why, despite our collective experiences, our historical scars of a war and a conflict, do we find ourselves on the brink once more? It is untenable to think that Europe might once again be plunged into the darkness of even more conflicts. The EU, its member states, and the global partners must stand firmly against any actions that destabilizes the region. We must not pander to those who would seek to undermine peace and security in the region. Our message must be clear to President Vladimir Vučić and his administration. Military posturing and escalating tensions are not the path forward. So it's time to unite our forces against those dictatorial regimes in the region.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Viola von Kramon Taubadel. You have the floor.
Mr. President, Commissioner, Council, dear colleague, the brutal attack on Kosovo police in Banjska is a stark reminder that we cannot take peace for granted in the Western Balkans. The shot at the police officer on duty, Afrim Bunyaku, was a shot at peace, a shot at security, a shot at the normal life in the north of Kosovo. We must clearly condemn such act of violence and call for the perpetrators to be brought to justice. The ties of Milan Radojević, former vice president of Srpska Lista, with the official Belgrade, are more than obvious. Serbia must unconditionally cooperate in the investigation and hold each and everyone who is responsible accountable along with Radojević. Serbia must immediately remove all its troops from the border with Kosovo and commit to the peace process. Yet, we must act too. The EU, along with NATO, must come up with a containment plan for the north of Kosovo. Reinforcement of NATO-led KFOR troops is crucial. Nothing will deter better than NATO's presence on the ground. I call on Germany and other EU member states to follow the UK's example of sending additional combat troops to KFOR and EUFOR immediately. This will be the key for our relevance and our success to preserve peace, not just in Kosovo, but on the entire Western Balkans. Thank you.
Danke, Herr Dambas.
Thank you. Mr. Dambatski.
Благодаря, председателю, комисарю, уважаеми колеги. Събитията в Косово много ясно потвърждават.
Thank you, Mr. President. The events in Kosovo have confirmed the fears that many of us had, either because of the tensions and the provocations by the Serbian president. He's clearly following the policies of Vladimir Putin. But the trouble is that we Europeans don't manage to adopt clear positions. The policy of Serbia has always been that of a provocateur towards Croatia, to Bosnia-Herzegovina. Now they're doing the same thing in Kosovo. Nothing is going to change about the behaviour of Serbia. It's the pattern followed by all its presidents. This is not going to help anybody. We should support Kosovo and protect its territorial integrity against Serbian provocation. They're friends of the Kremlin.
Well, there is responsibility in the conflict between Serbia and Kosovo. That responsibility would be the EU, and the fact that everyone is so careful with Kosovo here. In fact, Albin Kurti, your protege, had decided decided to appoint mayors in the area of Kosovo where there are ethnic Serbs. The idea was to just escalate the tension in an area that is the historic cradle for these people. Now we see the police attack, and the Serbs of Kosovo had to defend themselves, and we support them. And I would like to also state that to the Serbian people that I offer my support. What we need to make sure is that this type of act is condemned and sanctioned. Recently, Mr. Kurti said that there was no alternative to the EU, and this could lead to the worst. Some 300 attacks, some, for example, at the time of the Orthodox Christmas. None of these were investigated internationally. The 24th of September, yes, we deplore it. That does not erase it. The EU that is beginning to open its eyes to what the authorities in Kosovo are doing are using this attack to close the eyes again. And this is the same Kosovo that you would like to integrate in the EU. For us, it would not be possible to integrate them, this supposed state, and there are some member states of this union that don't even recognize the country.
Mr. Andor Deli, the floor is yours.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, dear Commissioner. The situation is extremely tense and complex. The recent tragic events clearly demonstrate that the solution must be found as quickly as possible. We should discuss the situation, and there has to be an impartial and thorough investigation. But all these events are just manifestations, symptoms of a much deeper problem, which is the decade-long unresolved problem of the Serbian community in Kosovo. The layout for a possible solution with the creation of the community of Serbian municipalities is already there. Actually, it has been there for a decade, since the Brussels Agreement of 2013. In addition, there are numerous international conventions and charters providing a wider framework to tackle the situation of special communities, which in addition are also obligatory elements of the Copenhagen criteria needed in the process of European integration. In other words, all legal elements are there. The political willingness of the European and American mediators is there, and after a decade, the government in Pristina has to make the necessary move. Thank you.
Danke. Unser nächster Redner ist Herr Andrej.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Mr. Andrej Kovacic.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioner, Council, dear colleagues. First of all those responsible for the attack by the Serb armed group need to be brought to justice. To achieve this, there needs to be an in-depth investigation who was behind the attack, who gave the orders, and where did the weapons and other equipment come from. Putin's Russia is strongly interested in destabilizing the Balkans, therefore we have to be very careful to prevent further provocations attempts. Secondly, KFOR must be strengthened and preventive measures have to be put in place in order to ensure such a terrorist attack cannot happen again. Finally, and most importantly for the stability of the region, peace negotiations are essential to reduce tensions and reach an acceptable solution with the final goal of full recognition of Kosovo by Serbia. I will repeat again our call to Serbian leadership to choose a side, either with the EU and the democratic countries or with Putin's Russia. Compliance with the EU foreign policy, including the sanctions against Russia and Belarus, and stand with Ukraine is essential. Unfortunately, the Serbian influence is still malicious in neighbouring countries supporting an anti-EU agenda, not only in Kosovo, but also in North Macedonia, Montenegro and Bosnia and Herzegovina. I hope and will be very happy to see a democratic Serbia overcoming the legacy of Yugoslav totalitarian dictatorship and the Milosevic doctrine. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Ms. Moretti.
Ciò che è accaduto lo scorso.
What took place in the 24th of September in the north of Kosovo was terrible. An explosion of violence that led to the deaths of several people, both Serbians and Kosovars. Now, there's nothing new here. Over the course of recent years, we have seen that there has been a frightening escalation, a rhetoric based on propaganda and fake events. This should not lead us astray from our path towards the normalization of relations between Pristina and Belgrade. Now, we can't ignore the violence, and that should not lead us away from this path that needs to be completed. We need to have an impartial investigation to see who the perpetrators are and bring them to consequences, but also work to put an end to the hate that leads to these events and that leaves a impact on people in flesh and blood. The EU obviously needs to work such that we don't have any further deaths or back to that fear that existed in the 1990s and go back to the violence that took place at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Mr. Grossel, 1 minute.
Events in northern Kosovo are still raising more questions than providing concrete answers. Regardless of the background, we need to condemn in the strongest possible way the use of force by illegal paramilitary forces. We need to have a thorough, impartial investigation by 4 EULEX on what actually happened and who is responsible. Despite the harsh words and accusations coming from different sides, there is still no clarity about what happened more than a week ago. We know lives were lost, and we know no one is talking anymore about a holistic and permanent solution to Serbian-Kosovo dispute as the starting point of the long-term stabilization of the Western Balkans. There are politicians in the Western Balkans, and there are people of the Western Balkans. What we need to achieve is a reconciliation among the people of the Western Balkans between the state borders as they are. I believe this can be achieved through an open and frank dialogue without any malicious foreign interference. But above all, there needs to be a dialogue among countries of Western Balkans which are committed to democratic principles in internal politics, to a rule-based international system in foreign relations, and truly and fully committed to future EU membership through the implementation of reforms for the benefit of their own people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Weitz.
Kommissar, Vorsitzender.
President, Commissioner, with the events of the 24th of September, one thing is clear, with nationalist talk President Vučić is stoking the situation. There's the Serbian security forces seem to be involved. We missed a new Balkan war. We should stop this appeasement policy of Vučić, and we should have an international inquiry. And until we have a finding, we should be freeze money for Serbia, and because we don't have positive results with the dialogue in Kosovo, our negotiator should reflect on his role and perhaps step back. In the EU, we should do everything so that we can avoid a flaming up of violence in the Balkan region. That must be our top priority. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Mr. Ilčić, 1 minute.
Poštovani kolege, dramatični događaji potvrdili su ono što sam ovdje rekao u svibnju.
Colleagues, the dramatic events in Kosovo have confirmed what I said back here in May. Serbia is the main reason for instability in Kosovo. The attack of Serbian militants on the Albanian police is a classic terrorist act, and Mr. Borrell, I think, missed a good opportunity to condemn it as such. 33 years ago, Serbian militants also shot at Croatian police, thus beginning the Serbian attack on Croatia. So I don't think we should underestimate what's going on in Kosovo. The Serbian community and the Serbian list are being remote controlled by Vučić, and he uses every opportunity to increase instability. There'll be no political autonomy possible for Serbian community today. Vučić doesn't care about the well-being of the people resident in Kosovo. He just wants to keep Kosovo in a difficult situation and keep up the hopes of the Serbian community of rejoining Serbia, including the Serbian Orthodox community. So I think we should say a clear no to Serbia's policy.
Reconciliation between Serbia and Kosovo is far from being just a regional issue. It is a strategic imperative for the whole of Europe. The recent failure in advancing this process is yet another obstacle on our way, but we must remain firm in saying that the future of the Western Balkans lies in our Union. This, of course, cannot remain just a slogan. We must insist on the 11 points plan presented last February, but it will be pivotal to give more concreteness to the provisions included therein. Only by setting a clear roadmap for the implementation and setting concrete incentives, we can make sure that both parties stick to the promises they made. Then it will come to the parties to leave apart long-lasting issues and focus on a common future. Therefore, I appeal once more to the leadership in Belgrade and Pristina to de-escalate immediately the tensions in northern Kosovo. We are here for supporting you. Let us work together with a proactive and constructive approach towards a shared goal, to meet your people's aspiration for a peaceful, stable and prosperous future within our common European family. Family, it is not, and violence, it is not the answer. It is just the past. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Mr. Galler, 1 minute.
Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, es wird Zeit, dass wir uns ehrlich machen.
We should be honest with our efforts for ordering our relations between Serbia and Kosovo. What happened on the 21st of September by Milan Radojcic, his parliamentaries. Fortunately, the Kosovo police prevented it worse. And that isn't the first time. In May, there were violent demonstrations with dozens of injured. Hardly any reaction from the EU. Vučić and Radojcic must be encouraged. Given our failure in the 90s, it's not what happens in Brussels, it's what campaigns they have in the media and how they act. Vučić has learned from Milosevic and others. Let some green men do something and don't be involved yourself. after the 24th of December, we can't have a return to business as usual. We have an agreement for the 27th of February, which he hasn't signed. We have no commitments in Kosovo. We are pushing for Kosovo for ratifying Article 7. If it's up to Serbia, we'll soon have a Republika Srpska 2.0. If the EU and the US make it clear to Belgrade to reduce the pressure and pre-accession means will be stopped, there'll be a chance for a return to a true dialogue. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Mr. Schieder, 1 minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, the situation in the border area between Serbia and Kosovo is highly dangerous. Representatives on both sides must contribute to de-escalation, of course, and it's the damn duty of every politician in the area to do what they can for stability and to maintain a prospect of joining Europe for their people. But what we are witnessing is that Vučić is pouring more and more oil on the flames, and the EU must finally put aside its naivety. We need a strong reaction from the EU, otherwise the whole tinder keg is going to go up in the Balkans. We have to put an end to nationalism, anti-democratic rhetoric and the anti-European language that we are hearing from the Serbian government. Unfortunately, it's not just in Serbia. And if politicians don't understand that, then they have to expect consequences, and consequences will mean freezing European financial support. And also, if they are not prepared to commit to a European understanding of human rights and abandon their nationalistic, populistic cause, then they have to forget about membership of the European Union under Vučić.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Strick, 1 minute.
Commissioner, we were all shocked on the 24th of September when a heavily armed Serbian gang with seemingly strong links to the government invaded Kosovo and brutally killed a police officer. Shocked, but not surprised, because this is what EU appeasement strategy leads to. For years we have silently allowed Vučić to undermine stability in the region, to remain supportive of the Kremlin, and to demolish minority rights in his own country. Yet, IPA funds flow into his direction and we treat him as a friend, incentivizing him to go further. And this is what autocrats do when they face impunity. We should have learned our lesson with Putin. After the recent events, it's high time that EU leaders wake up. The security situation in the Balkans is really under high threat. We need to act now to protect the citizens of the Western Balkans and to protect their prospect of becoming part of the EU.
Thank you. The next speaker, Ms. Rookmaker, 1 minute.
Dames en heren. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here asking for your attention for a long-lasting conflict that is far from being resolved. That is the conflict between Kosovo and Serbia, a conflict that has lasted all too long already and which confronts us with the need for dialogue, understanding and respect for sovereignty. In the heart of Europe, 2 decades after the end of the violent conflict in the area, wounds still not have healed. The time has come to look forward and to stop looking at the past. I believe in the power of dialogue, where both parties recognize and respect one another. This has to be facilitated by the EU with impartial mediators that acknowledge and respect both sides. We mustn't forget that behind political conflicts there are people who deserve to live in peace, free of fear and uncertainty. So let us do what we can for a future in which Kosovo and Serbia can live side by side in peace and with mutual respect within an EU framework. A future in which the inhabitants of both countries are no longer defined by conflicts from the past, but by their common hope and ambition for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker, Ms. Zovko, for 1 minute.
Commissioner, dear colleagues, I strongly condemn the attack by an armed terrorist group against Kosovo police officers near Banjska monastery, which left 1 police officer and 3 attackers dead. My deepest condolences to the family of the Kosovo police sergeant killed on the line of duty. In order to de-escalate the current situation in northern Kosovo, Serbia must take immediate and decisive steps to reduce both political and ethnic tensions. That includes the immediate withdrawal of its remaining forces from the border region of Kosovo. In that regard, I welcome the decision by NATO to strengthen KFOR to address the situation in Kosovo and to deter Serbia from further escalation. These actions by Serbia cannot remain unanswered and require our clear and strong response. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nemic, 1 minute.
Spoštovani visoki zbor, spoštovani komisar Lenarčič.
Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner, now it is a fact that relations between Serbia and Kosovo are tense and have been for several years. There is hope for dialogue, but it hasn't led to a reliable agreement for normalization. We are as far away today as we've ever been. What took place in Banjska has made relations worse, relations that were already bad to begin with. And I condemn any of these violent actions and call for the responsibles to be brought to justice. All efforts made by the authorities should be carried out such that there is no reoccurrence of these events. I'd like to call for the President and the Prime Minister to dialogue. And specifically, Mr. Kurti must reorganize the elections, and there's too risky.
Thank you. Mr. Mandel, 1 minute. President, Commissioner, colleagues. Commissioner Lenarčič is sitting here and must represent the Commission, where different members are responsible for the fact that the Commission has failed with its West Balkan policy. Mr. Borrell is not there. The other colleagues are not there. Where is it more important for these Commission representatives to be than here? I would like to ask these 3 gentlemen whether they have visited a valley in Kosovo where this is where all the men and young men were murdered and abducted, where I've visited this valley, and I have an impression of why people in Kosovo are afraid. If things like those in the last week happen, and the Commission shouldn't go back to business as usual, shouldn't continue appeasement. They should make it clear to the Vučić regime, and the Kosovo people can't be provoked, and there should be de-escalation taking place. Thank you. Mr. Papadakis, for 1 minute.
Σερβίας και Κωσόβου στο τραπέζι του διαλόγου. Η ένταση που υπάρχει στην περιοχή δεν μπορεί να εκτονωθεί με άλλο τρόπο παρά...
The tension cannot be released but through peace. We shouldn't return to 1998. nobody will win in this case if they follow the road filled with blood. The terrorist attack in Banjska, in northern Kosovo, should be the beginning of a new round of implementation of what has been agreed from both sides. This step, I was criticizing the situation in Serbia and the lack of progress on some issues on its way for its accession in the European Union. The condemnation by Mr. Vučić of the terrorist attacks, also today's arrest of the leader of the terrorists, do not allow further discussions for sanctions against Serbia, because finally the Serbian people will pay if they have sanctions. The European Union at the same time should insist, showing both sides that they have immediately to implement the things on which they have agreed upon. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Glavak, 1 minute.
Hvala lijepa predsjedavajući, kolegice I kolege.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, the situation in Kosovo is extremely complex. We must pay full attention. Dialogue with weapons is not dialogue. This is not by happenstance. I condemn the attack against the Kosovar police. Colleagues, today we have paramilitary groups that are responsible for these attacks. For the 3 deaths, there has been a day of mourning in Serbia. I think that we can draw our conclusions. We need an investigation and tangible measures. We cannot have a mechanism if we're not able to act. We need to be more audacious. We've heard a belligerent rhetoric at the doors of our union. And so what we know is that the EU is based on peace, cooperation, collaboration. If Serbia would like to be a part of our family, well, then this family would have to accept these principles. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reuten, now 1 minute.
President, Commission, Council, colleagues. President Vučić did it again. He pushed the escalation button, deliberately jeopardizing peace and security, even of the people he says to care about, but holds hostage. This time, he pushed harder than ever before. Therefore, the usual de-escalation is not so easy. This pattern should have ended a long time ago. But autocrats like Vučić see how far they can go and then go a little further next time. President Vučić is playing with fire, and as European Union, we can only distinguish it by showing decisiveness and stop the untenable appeasement of the destabilizers. Despite months of widespread criticism from this House, all the EU has managed to do was imposing sanctions on Kosovo. What is stopping us from punitive measures on Serbia? The reckless actions of the Serbian government need to have consequences. Commission, Council, take action.
Thank you. Mr. Falca, 1 minute.
Domnule comisar, stimați colegi, Europa nu-și permite și nici nu-și dorește.
Mr. President, Commissioner, Europe is witnessing what is happening in the Balkans, but we cannot allow conflicts to break out, as we have just seen in Nagorno-Karabakh. Without any decisive action on the part of Europe, we will no doubt witness an escalation of violence, which will last for years to come. And of course, Putin is putting he's making his contribution because, of course, it works in his favour. I think the European Union should be more resolute and decisive, should offer the parties concerned a clear, tangible path towards the European Union. Of course, it will depend on the parties, but it will depend on us as well to support them, to allow the region to become more democratic.
I have 2 names on my list, and I would like to give a floor to Tomislav Sokol, please.
Hvala lijepa. 4 mrtvih. To je epilog pohoda srpske terorističke skupine.
4 4 dead. That is the result of the Serbian terrorist group which attacked Kosovars. The Serbian method, blockades and attacks on police remind us of bloody traits which happened in Croatia. There's no doubt that these attacks were under the protection of Serbia. I talked recently about the report on Serbia. I hoped that Serbian hegemony would end. Unfortunately, the situation hasn't improved. We see now that the Serbian hegemony policy is destabilizing Kosovo. If Serbia is behind these attacks, we must punish Serbia, because the responsibility lies with Mr. Vučić.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Slovakia, the country that I come from, is one of those countries that do not recognize the independent and separate Kosovo. And regardless of this fact, I wish that these two ethnic groups be able to live next to each other in peace. Serbia-Kosovo relations have undergone another shock in the past few days, and the tension in northern Kosovo is high, and gunfights can happen anytime in the future. I have to say that not only the Serbs are responsible for the fact that this problem cannot be solved, we should also take into account the frequent provocations that a Serbian minority living in Kosovo faces. When diplomacy fails, weapons are used to resolve the conflict. War and armed conflicts never resolved anything and only brought the loss of lives, misery and suffering. Therefore, I consider it necessary that both ethnic groups return to a dialogue and work on a resolution of the situation, as they want to see their future in the EU. But the prize for becoming a member of the EU is to collaborate in order to avoid a future loss of lives. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, we are closing HDI procedure, and I would like to ask to take a floor for the Commission to Commissioner Lenarčič. Floor is yours, Commissioner.
Mr. President, honourable members, I will be very brief and very clear. The debate today testifies of the need for the European Union to stay united and use all its leverage on both Kosovo and Serbia to de-escalate tensions and return to the implementation of their dialogue obligations and normalization process. Their respective European paths are dependent on this. In other words, their future in the EU, nothing less, is at stake. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now for the Council, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Navarro Rios. Floor is yours.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to reiterate our condemnation of the attack. It is clear that everything has to be investigated, and those responsible have to be brought to justice at the same time. De-escalation is still a first priority. Both parties have to do everything they can, take all of the measures to achieve this. As I have already said, in line with what Commissioner Lenarčič has just said, the position of the EU is very firm on this. The way to progress has been clearly set out. It is vital there be de-escalation and a return to the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue facilitated by the EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kolēģi, tagad debates ir slēgtas par šo jautājumu un balsu.
This brings this debate to a conclusion. The vote will take place during the next session.